So I went to this neurologist and he said, look, do you do anything else because this is the end of your career? I've dealt with thousands of cases. You're never going to play again professionally. You need to do something else.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath. So glad to have you here, and visit our site at contrabassconversations.com for all the details about these hundreds of episodes going back almost 10 years at this point. And please send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I love hearing people's stories. You can email me at feedback@contrabassconversations.com. I know you're going to dig today's story with Scott Devine of scottsbasslessons.com. I probably do not need to introduce Scott to you. He's one of the internet's most recognized bass player, probably one of the most recognized bass players on the internet. And he has such a great story to share. That snippet at the beginning, that was just a little bit of what happened to Scott with the neurologist telling him he's never going to play again. We talk about what that's all about and where he went from there. I think you'll identify with this. I think you'll just love hearing about this story. And we really get into how Scott built this online bass juggernaut of a resource that he's got at Scott's Bass Lessons with 10,000 members in his membership site and all kinds of details like that. So here's our conversation with Scott, and definitely if you're not following on with Scott, which again, probably you are already, but if you're not, scottsbasslessons.com, and subscribe to his YouTube channel and check out the Academy and everything that he's got going on. Now, I'm so thankful to D'Addario Strings for sponsoring the podcast, and I want to talk a bit about their Zyx strings, which I've been using for the last 6 weeks or so, 7 weeks. Love them, love the tone, love the response. It's a very gut-like response. Synthetic strings, but with a gut-like response. They're great under the bow. They're great with pizzicato. They're used by artists like Barry Bales, Missy Raines, Chris Jennings, Tim Surratt, and they come in medium and light gauge. I've been playing the medium. I'm going to put on the light any day here, and I love them. Check them out, and check out their string giveaway at contrabassconversations.com/strings. I'd also like to thank Bass Capos for providing the hosting for Contrabass Conversations. Bass Capos are an excellent choice for any bass player using or looking to implement a double bass extension. They're easy to install and adjust, they're cheaper, and they're more reliable than hand-built latches. They're also lighter and quicker in operation. Learn more at basscapos.com. And thank you to Rob Anzalotti for providing the hosting for Contrabass Conversations. And if you haven't listened to his interview, by the way, check him out, contrabassconversations.com/Rob Anzalotti. Okay, I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Scott Devine. Here we go. Well, I'm on the line with Scott Devine from Scott's Bass Lessons, and I'm just so glad to have you on the podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Hey man, how's it going? Great to be here, Jason. Absolutely. How many electric players have you had on your podcast?
Well, in a way, I've had a lot, because like just about everybody plays some electric, but exclusively electric, I think maybe only one or two.
Yay!
Yeah, so you're blazing new paths for the my podcast name kind of limits me. So
awesome, man. How many podcasts? I'm not going to interview you, don't worry. But just for my own curiosity, how many podcasts have you done?
I just finished editing number 255.
Wow.
So yeah, but the first 160 were like between 2006, 2007, 2008. So it was like kind of early years. And then I went and did something else for 6 or 7 years and kind of brought the podcast back to life about a year ago.
So you were at it when nobody else was doing it. That's amazing.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many conversations I had. Reach out to someone to be on the podcast, and they're like, "Who are you? And what's a podcast? And why should I be on that?" But it's like totally different times now, man. And I'm digging what you're doing so much. I mean, it's so cool to follow along with. I was just listening to Victor Wooten, your talk with him this morning, and Freak Bass you just had on, right?
Freak Bass was awesome. Yeah, he was awesome. Yeah, we've had a ton of people on. We've got some cool guys coming up. We've got Brian Bella coming up, who plays with Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. Who else have we got? Doug Wimbish, who did sort of like the Sugar Hill Gang, and this is all before my time. Yeah. But he played with like the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. It's cool. It's just sort of like, it's just completely self-indulgent to me, because it just means I can get and, sit with these guys and find out all the information that I want to know. Yeah. And then all the listeners can listen in as well. So yeah, so it's good for me and good for them.
I'm sure it's like the sort of conversation, like for me, I think of the podcast, it's like a conversation I'd be having over a beer with someone anyway. Yeah, and then you just get to open it up to this wider world, and it must be so much fun to sit down with these guys and talk about their years in music and that kind of thing. And how do you even come up with questions for these people? Like how do you come up with,
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a really good interviewer or anything like that, because I'm 40 odd podcasts in. I'm kind of learning as I go. But just for me, I kind of just want to know about their lives, really, and how they got to where they are, their struggles, their wins, all the little intricacies that went into getting them to where they are. So in a way, what I've found is I kind of just set them going. I'm just sort of like, tell us how you got into bass. And then the conversation develops from there, just like I would be talking to a friend in a pub, having a coffee or a pint or, So in terms of question, and then it kind of, I've got like a loose framework of what I want, the things that I want to pull out, Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's just like a super chilled, just, feeling my way through it as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, I'm sure that doing all the videos that you've done and everything you've done over the years, you're kind of comfortable with just coming up with things off the top of your head and kind of going with the flow like that.
Yeah. Like I've done a lot of, I would say that I'm much more comfortable on video. Strangely, you'd think it would be, the opposite for a lot of people. But for me, because I've recorded so many videos, like I've got no idea, like maybe 500 actually more, maybe because I've done, obviously I've got the YouTube channel that's got, 250 videos on it, but we've got the Academy on Scott's Bass Lessons. And I think that we've done like 40 or 50 hours of courses on there. So the amount of, I've spent a lot of time in front of the camera. So I'm pretty chilled in front of the camera. But the microphone when I'm interviewing, I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to it. Yeah, I'm getting used to it.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I'd love to hear, like, how did you get into all of this, just with the Scott's bass lessons and everything? Can you maybe take my listeners through just like how you discovered the bass and maybe just the story of your life and getting into this?
Absolutely. Well, I discovered the bass. I was a guitar player first, essentially. Like a lot of dudes, right? Or dudettes. Mm-hmm. I was a guitar player first, and that happened because a guy at school, we were like 13, he really wanted to take lessons, and we had to have a minimum amount of people that would take lessons for an outside guitar tutor to come into the school. So he kind of bullied me into it. He was like, come on, please, I really want to do the guitar lessons. I was like, okay. I had no real interest in music at all. And then so started doing these guitar lessons, and lo and behold, a month went by. You know what it's like when you're a kid, you want to do something one week, the next week you don't care about it. But I actually really enjoyed this. I was like, actually, this is quite fun. And really got into it from that. My dad was really enthusiastic about, initially he wasn't actually. Initially he was like, there's no way I'm buying you a guitar. I was like, please. So they bought me a $30 guitar. And it's, to this day, it's still the hardest guitar I've ever played in my life. The action was like a drained Olympic swimming pool. You couldn't, it was just crazy. So anyway, so I struggled away on that. And then I think that he saw that I was really into it. And he got into it as well. My father was like, oh, this looks like fun, So we both kind of started learning together and then he really pushed me. My dad really didn't like his professional career at all. He really didn't like his job, so he really pushed me, and he was like, whatever you do, end up doing something that you love. Whatever it is, just make sure you don't do what I do. Make sure you do something that you really love. So got into guitar and really kind of just sort of like wandered. I wasn't a good student at school. Wandered through school, was only interested in music really, and girls obviously, but music, actually probably girls more than music, but it comes in circles and roundabouts. At one point it was definitely more guitar than girls. So so got into guitar, and then really got to sort of like 16 or 17, was kind of failing at school, didn't know what to do, and saw an advert in a newspaper for an apprentice luthier. I was like, an apprentice luthier, this is what I want to do with my life. I really like making things with my hands and, woodcraft at school and things like that. I thought, excellent, this is what I can do. So went and bullied that guy so much to give me the job. I'd turn up at that place literally every day. Have you decided yet? Have you decided who you're going to take? And now he's like, I'm best friends with the guy. He's 65, he's a lot older than me, but, we've remained friends all these years. This was like 20 years ago when I was, getting the first job from him, and ended up getting the job as an apprentice luthier. Did that for a couple of years. Found out that being a luthier is incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard work, and I really never lost the love for music. I wanted to be a player as well. I didn't really know that at the time, but the guy who gave me the job, who it's actually, just to mention their name, Overwater Basses. It's the guy that runs the company is called Chris May. He had a really colourful career in terms of, who his clients were, like guys in the West End, which is the English version of Broadway, guys that were touring musicians, guys that were doing corporate gigs. This was a completely new world for me. I came from a town where, everybody thought to be a professional musician, you had to be in a famous band. Yeah. I didn't know that there was this, this culture out there of being a freelancer. And through working with Chris, he re-educated me, and he was like, and opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, I could actually do this. And from, by accident, ended up getting a completely random gig on bass. Didn't play bass at the time. Ended up getting offered a gig on bass at a local theatre because the bass player that was working there had a health issue and couldn't get anybody to cover him. Phoned the workshop that I worked in a panic and said, I've got this health issue. I'm going to have to go in for this operation. Do any of your guys, or do you know any bass players in the area that could cover me for a month doing the theatre? And Chris said, yeah, there's a guy for me that could do it. I didn't even play bass. It was insanity. And on top of this, I didn't read I read treble clef, but I didn't read bass clef at all. And he put my name forward for it. And I was just thrust into that. I was given this pad of just hundreds of tunes, all notated. And I was given, I think, like if my memory serves me correctly, maybe 2 weeks to 4 weeks or something to prepare for this gig. So I just sat there with the cassette tapes at the time, and I just learned everything and made notes all over every single bit of notation. I just scribbled all the notes on it so I could do it, and then went in and did it. It was frightening, but I did it, and I think I covered him for about 2 weeks to maybe a month. And then that experience was that was the seed that was like, okay, you need to go do this as a career. Oh, wow. That's what, so, and then obviously sort of like it just roller coaster into, I moved to a bigger city to try and get more gigs, or even just get a gig, because I didn't have any gigs at the time, learn all about that. And I ended up working on, in lots of corporate bands, and ended up actually on the cruise ships. I did that thing for a long time. Well, I did the longest contract I ever did was 7 months, which is a real big stretch, But I did a few different cruise ships and absolutely loved it. I was in my early 20s. It was wild, playing bass, in the Caribbean, all around the Mediterranean. Saying it out loud, I just, I couldn't even believe it was happening. It was like this, it was like the biggest, the best kept secret ever. I'd gone from working, 10 to 12 hours a day in a dusty workshop, sanding basses, to chilling out on the beach in Antigua, right? So it was just sort of like so random. So yeah, did that. But, through doing that, I saw that some of the guys were just stuck in that groove, and they'd just been on there for years. And And I was a really good student at this point. I was really, really pushing myself and pushing my bass playing, and that it was a really great learning curve. I should just rewind as well and say that I did actually try to get into music school before I went on the cruise ships, and was knocked back because I didn't have any academic qualifications.
Oh, okay.
They were like, yeah, great bass playing, but who cares about that? You can't get in because you haven't got a maths A level or something like that. Whatever their excuse was. So not that I've got a thing about music schools, like they're great, but I was, it's funny now because obviously I've taught in a lot of music schools. Yeah, the tables turned, but yeah, did the cruise ships and then moved back to the UK. Just sort of like pushed along my career. Just ended up doing a lot of musical directing for record companies and record labels. Ended up working for Sony and being musical director for some of their artists, especially over in Europe and Poland and stuff like that. Which was, just the people you meet just lead you to different, down different alleys, right? Doing that whole thing up until late 20s, right? And then I was getting some strange feelings in my hands, I suppose. I didn't really know what it was at the time. Strange movements in my fingers, and it wasn't really uncomfortable, but it was just my fingers were just not really doing exactly what I wanted them to do. It's hard to put into words, but they were, for instance, I'd go to move my index finger and my little finger would move slightly. Oh, yeah. So all of these weird things started happening. And this really, it was like a 2-year journey really of this medical condition. I'll tell everybody about it in a minute. I'll tell them what it was. But it ended up that over a 2-year stretch that by the time I was, I think maybe 28, 29, I couldn't even play a major scale. So I'd gone from playing, I don't know, like 8 gigs a week to playing 1 gig a week and just sort of just holding on by, just by brute force, just getting through the gig, just because it was my full-time living. It's not that I wasn't, I didn't have a day gig or anything. This was like I had a mortgage and, a wife and kids on the way and the whole 9 yards. And I couldn't play. So I went to, you name it. I went, chiropractors, physiotherapists. Nobody knew what it was. And I ended up paying to see a private neurologist in the UK. I went to him and he actually knew exactly what it was straight away. It was a condition called focal dystonia, which is a neurological condition where the frontal lobe or the frontal cortex of the brain, because some people have overplasticity of the brain. If you've got a lot of plasticity of the brain, it means that you're very good at integral kind of things with your fingers. Great for playing guitar and bass, right? Yeah. But it also puts you in danger of, some people can develop something called focal dystonia where the frontal cortex remaps itself and gets all messed up. If you think about the frontal cortex being like a honeycomb, and for each little honeycomb, that honeycomb, when you want to move your index finger, an electrical impulse is sent down one of those honeycombs to your index finger. And if you want to move your little finger, then it's a different honeycomb. So each little honeycomb has got like a little, its own separate movement. And there's thousands, probably millions of them on the front of your brain, right? Well, with focal dystonia, what they do is it breaks down the actual pathways between the honeycombs. So the electrical impulse gets sent, but instead of going down the right honeycomb, it goes down the one next to it, and all that. So all the neurological signals get messed up, and it ends up in just a shenanigans, a disaster, And that's what happened. So I went to this neurologist, and he said, "Look, do you do anything else, because this is the end of your career?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "This is it. You won't be able to do this anymore. This is like wherever you go online, they'll tell you that this can be fixed, and I'm sure in some bizarre cases it has been fixed. But in my experience, this is it. I've dealt with thousands of cases. You're never going to play again professionally. You need to do something else." So I didn't do anything else. I'd never done anything else. As I told you, I was terrible at school, and music was the only thing I ever did. So I decided to take like some months off and just thought, I'm just going to rest it. Did a lot of research online, went to specialists, like literally all over. Like I flew to Barcelona, I flew to Seville, There's a few specialists over in Spain trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to basically, find a cure for myself. And while I was doing this, I was taking time off bass as well, just to rest my hands. I should say that it's not painful at all. It's not, it's not. I wasn't taking the time off because it was painful. I was taking the time off because I just couldn't play. And taking the time off did help a bit, actually. And I actually went to see a specialist in London who randomly mentioned that one of her patients, a violin player, was playing with latex gloves on, and it was really helping them because it was tricking the brain, essentially. It was tricking the what the brain was, feeling and the signals it was sending out. So I just thought, well, latex gloves might not work too well on bass, but I had seen a fantastic French Cameroon bass player called Etienne Mbappé, who played with the Zaunel Syndicate, who resides over in Paris. He plays with gloves because he's got these guys that get super sweaty hands, that basically rot their strings in a day. He has that. So he wore silk gloves. I just thought, well, he wears silk gloves. I'll try it out. And lo and behold, that was the answer. That was the key for me. It didn't completely cure my condition at all. I suffer from it every day, typing and stuff. Sometimes it's so bad. I know people can't see this, but I'm just going to grab 2 pens. I actually type using 2 pens sometimes, one in each hand instead of using my fingers, because the more I type, the worse it gets. So I've essentially got a threshold. And if I play a lot, if I did sort of 4 gigs in a week, I'd be in danger of it getting worse. But the threshold it is at the minute, I can manage it. I've learned how to manage it. The gloves, I wear gloves when I play. There aren't silk gloves, actually. I don't know what they are. Some sort of white, material type, super thin material. I get them from Amazon. And really, that whole experience, while I was taking the break from playing, I missed bass playing so much, and I'd gone crazy at this point. Seriously, I can remember I actually thought I was going to be a dog walker at one point. I was like, what dog? Seriously, I was like, what can I do with my life? Because I can't play anymore, so I'll just be a dog walker. So I set up a dog walking website. I never walked one dog. I never got one client. I set up the website, and that was enough for me to understand that I didn't want to walk dogs for a living. But at least I set up the website. And I've got to, put it out there that I am so untech as well. I have no computer knowledge. I am sort of I was the year before computers came into schools. I have no tech knowledge. So for me to put a website together, it was just so hard. Anyway, so I was feeling so down about my playing and everything, really missed it. And every now and again, I'd watch people on YouTube. I was really late to the internet. I set up Scott's Bass Lessons, which is the thing that I run now. I set up that, I think, maybe 6 months after I bought my first computer.
Whoa.
Right. And And I set Scott's Bass Lessons up 6 years ago. So I maybe got it 6.5, so 7 years ago, maybe I bought my first computer. I didn't know how to switch it off. I used to just switch it off at the mains, and my wife would be like, "What are you doing? You need to shut it down." And I was like, "Why do I need to shut it down if I just do this?" It was the whole thing. You get it, right? So I'm super untech, and so I bought this computer while I was, in my hiatus, as it were, not playing, and I'd watch people. I'd found this thing called YouTube, which was great, and I was watching some bass players, on YouTube. And I just noticed that there was nobody, there was a couple of people teaching online, but it was more, hey, here's a riff. Yeah. They weren't even speaking about the riff. They were just sort of playing the riff and then slowing it down maybe. And then all the fellow bass nerds around the world would go and learn that riff. And it's great, right? But just for me, from an educational background or an educational standpoint, I was just but they're not really learning all the ingredients that go into making the actual thing. Yeah. So if they want to get that knowledge and use it in any other situation, they're not going to be able to do that. So I just thought, and at this point, I was kind of messing around on bass a little bit. maybe sort of like 4 months into not playing, I was maybe playing sort of like half an hour a day. And I just thought, well, maybe that half an hour a day, I might record a lesson and put it on YouTube and just explain some stuff so people can get some knowledge from it, And I did that, and so the first one, so I uploaded maybe sort of like 2 or 3 videos to start with onto YouTube, and they were maybe sort of like a month apart or something like that. And the feedback, I was at such a low point in my life when it came to playing bass that when when people gave me feedback, the comments on YouTube and stuff like that, people were like, "Oh, this is really great," and it was just what I needed to make me feel better about myself, And I was just like, "This is amazing." So I just did it more and more, and then did it more and more, and can I make a business from this? And did it more and more, and figured out how to control the focal dystonia. So I could play, so I was back gigging, but at this point I knew that I really wanted to, I'd been given an opportunity online. I knew it was the right time. Nobody was really doing it, so I just started pushing it more and more and more. And then fast forward 5 or 6 years, I've got, probably a staff of 8, and and the rest is history kind of thing. And this is what I do now, and it's just, I've created a monster. And now, we produce like 10 videos, maybe more every week, like a course every month. Just crazy amounts of, we've got videographers working for us and the whole thing. So that's in a nutshell my story up until now.
Wow, that's the focal dystonia. The principal oboe player of the Chicago Symphony, Alex Klein, he came down with that when I was at university, and I remember just hearing about that, and it's what a tremendous blow to any musician. It's just amazing how you worked through that. And it's so tough because it's not like tendonitis or something like that. It's because it's neurological. I was wondering if it affected everything and not just playing. So it does. It affects typing and everything.
Yeah. For me, it affects everything. Yeah. Like some people, it's just when they play. Like I know a lot, you can get it in your lip. A lot of trombone players and trumpet players get it in their lips. Obviously, like pianists get it, classical guitar players get it, and for a lot of them, it's just when they play. But for me, it's everything. Yeah. It's everything. It's when I type. Generally when I type. So that's the sort of like the main thing, obviously. But playing bass and guitar and stuff like that, it does affect it. But in terms of it's really bad because as a musician, you're just aware of like tendonitis and RSI and carpal tunnel and these things. And these things are sort of like, they're bad, but you do see a lot of people recovering from them. Yeah. Where focal dystonia, it's like, oh, this is really bad. And you didn't even know about it because, the knowledge out there there's not so much knowledge out there about it yet,
I love hearing about your cruise ship gigs too. I mean, that's such a subculture that I think people aren't involved in that. Like they don't even know. I've never did it myself, but one of my best friends from college, he did that for years and years in the Caribbean. And
if anybody's listening to this and they're in sort of like, and they're young and maybe sort of like about to graduate or they're thinking about going to music school or something like that, when you get out, you've got to go and work on a cruise ship. Just do one, just sort of like for 6. It's just so wild. It's so fun. You get to see the world and get paid. It's amazing. It's like still today, I'm sort of like, I think about it, it's just great days.
Man, well, it's so interesting to hear how everything just sort of organically evolved for you on YouTube. It's like getting that feedback from people, and that's just so cool that like at that kind of low point that sort of gave you something to look forward to, and that's amazing. When did the Academy start? That's pretty recent, right?
Yeah, it's like maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years ago, I would say. I'm terrible with dates. I'm so in awe of people that say, oh, yeah, back in 96, I was doing this. I'm like, 96? I've got no idea how old I was in 96. I've got no idea where I was living in 96. I'm so bad at dates. Anyway, but yeah, it's like 2 years ago, I think. The Academy was 2 years ago. And really, when we started it, I really didn't know what it would be. It was kind of just dip my toe in the water and figure it out as we go along. And then fast forward to now, we're doing these like live weekly, like technology has just blown up, right? So we've got, all these great educators doing live weekly live streams for all the Academy members. It's crazy.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's just what I wanted as a kid. Again, it's sort of like super selfish. I've just built something that I would have wanted when I was a kid, when I was learning. I can remember I didn't even watch people on YouTube because there was no YouTube. I didn't own a computer. So I listened to these guys and I was just in awe of what they were doing. And now with today's technology, I can get all of the best bass educators in the world. I've got like Danny Morris from Berkeley, got Todd Johnson, who used to teach at MI. We've got all these great guys, and they just and they're there every week for the Academy members. And the Academy members can sit at home and watch them and ask them questions in real time. It blows my mind even thinking about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so amazing what this technology can do. I mean, how cool is it that you're in Leeds, I'm in San Francisco. You could be reaching someone in Australia or in Canada or anywhere, and bringing all that great knowledge is just such an amazing evolution in terms of education. I mean, it's really cool.
It's insane. It's insane. I think we're living through one of the great, shifts in culture, which I think is really interesting, and I think it's something because we're in the middle of it, we're not really realizing it to a certain extent. I can remember somebody talking about autonomous cars a few days ago. I was like, dude, who cares about autonomous cars? We're living through something that's way bigger than that. The entire world's just been connected in real time, and that's huge, Obviously, autonomous cars will be huge, but in terms of, the internet, that was massive. And I so, not bass related, but I'm not like a history nerd or anything like that. But I know that a similar thing happened when the railways were developed. It changed culture around the world, and before the rail system, people were living in these tiny pocket of communities, and if you wanted something, it was your neighbor that made it, and basically the world blew up in terms of, social interaction and trade via the rail system. And I think that the internet is exactly the same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's I never even thought about it as compared to the railroads, but that's totally true. Like 5 years before versus 5 years after the railroads, you got towns springing up, and that's so cool. And so you've got these weekly events with different people from all over the world in the membership site. Yeah. And I know you have tons of other stuff. What else is in there? You got your courses. What else?
We've got courses. At the minute we've got, I think, maybe like 12 or 13 courses, and some of them are like an hour to 2 hours long, and some of them are 10 hours long. We're actually in the process of breaking those longer courses down into smaller courses, breaking them out so they're more digestible for people, basically. So we've got the courses. We've got the live seminars. We do live Q&As where I'll just hop on every month and do sort of like a live Q&A. We've got a huge community in there of all of bass. Like I would guess it's the largest bass educational community in the world. Mm-hmm. We've got over 10,000 members where they're all kind of helping each other along. So if anybody's got a question, like if I had a question I'm a student now, right? But when I was like super basic and I really didn't know what the heck was going on, and I didn't have anybody to ask. Whereas now you just hop on a forum and you can ask people, and what's great about the community that we built inside the Academy is that they're all there doing the same thing. They're all there trying to get their bass playing to the next level, and it's a really positive atmosphere. So everybody's kind of sort of like pushing each other along, and it's the accountability of it as well. I think that's something that a lot of people miss out on if they're not in music school. I think in music school there is like a built-in accountability there, whereas if you're at home just practicing day in day out on your own, that accountability isn't there sometimes. So what we've done is we've built that in, and we really promote that people start their own practice logs, because I'm a huge fan of that. I think that people should be logging what they're practicing so they can look back at what they've been working on and figure out whether it's been working or not, instead of just sort of like meandering down this path of, just picking your bass up every day, looking at what you've been working on. Has that been working? If it's not been working, why is it not been working? Can I change it? Do I need to ditch it and move on to something else or try? I'm like, I don't know. I really like reverse engineering things, kind of really looking at that from that level, and really looking for measurable improvements in what I do. So I feel sort of like, I feel like there's some improvement instead of just sort of like chipping away at the coal face and hoping that I get better by next year. What else is in the academy? So there's a ton of stuff. We do podcasts, but they can obviously, all the academy members can actually watch the podcasts as well, which is cool. I do this thing called the weekly student feedback focus, where all the members can submit videos to me and I'll review them and then give them direct video feedback as well, that's cool, man. Like I love that from my perspective, but I love it from their perspective as well, because they can get direct feedback from me from their place. All they need is a webcam, and they can record themselves playing, and whatever the question is, they can ask. We've got this great member called Toby Ellis, and he rinses me every time. Every week, it's not like, it's like Toby's here, like Mike Johnson might want to know if his left-hand technique's all right, and Charlotte from Chicago might want to know if her picking technique's all right. And Toby comes and he's like, dude, right. And he's like, he records the video and he's got like 10 questions in there. But I'm like, I say it to all the other members, I'm like, you've got me. Like I do this every Friday. I just sit down and give you all direct feedback, and we film it. So it's all nicely edited up for everybody, and then we upload it to the site so all the individual members can watch it. But all the other guys that haven't submitted a video, those guys can watch it as well, because I'm a real believer in if you're struggling with something, then there's probably like 1,000 other people struggling with the same thing, right? So just being able to watch somebody else getting feedback will really help a lot of other people as well. So that's why we built that into the academy, just to make sure that people can get direct feedback from me. What we're also going to be doing is making sure that some of the other faculty members as well can give people direct feedback via video. But then on top of that, making sure that all the other students can watch it, even if they haven't submitted for feedback, just so they can learn from other people as well.
I'm so into what you've built. I mean, you really have built like a 21st century music school. I mean, this is what using what we have available, like with this amazing technology, and I mean, 10,000 people. So that's like a university, right? But it's a university of bass players worldwide who want to be there and who are there with the same goal in mind. I just think that's the way education's going. And it's just, I mean, just hats off to you for coming up with this. It's just a magnificent model, and that's such a cool community, and that's so exciting. I've got a question for you. And you maybe have thought about this a little bit. I was talking with Corey Brown, who runs No Trouble. And so Corey and I were kind of speculating, how many bass players in the world do you think there are? Do you have any? I mean, if anybody would have a rough estimate, it would be you.
Right. So yeah, like I should really know this from a business perspective. You should, like, if anybody's into business listening to this, that you should know that how big your market is, how many prospective clients you've got. But this, and anybody like I talk to that's really into business is always asks me this: how many bass players are there in the world? I'm always like, I've got no idea. Yeah. But I do know that some of the big Facebook pages have like 800,000 or 900,000 likes. So that for me, that's like, well, okay, well, even if a sort of like a rough estimate, 50% of the bass players in the world had liked that one of those big pages, that means 50% haven't. So that's sort of like, kicking it over 1.5 million. Yeah. But that's like a rough guesstimate. But maybe sort of like 2 million, 3 million. I wouldn't say crazy, but there's a lot of bass players, and there's a lot of people bringing it, like starting as well. That's the thing. There's a lot of people actually starting the bass, and with the academy, that's one thing I hear all the time is, well, there's two things actually. One is I was a guitar player, but I love your lessons so much, I've started playing bass. I'm like, win. That's my job done. I've converted you. And the other one is that I watched you, and this is weird. I can't even get my head around this. But a lot of people are like, well, I was watching your lessons. I love them so much, so I've decided to play the bass. And they've chosen the bass through finding my lessons online. Now that, like, because I wasn't involved in that when I was a kid, I can't even imagine what that, like, maybe I'm guessing that people must watch video, like lessons online, trying to choose what instrument they play. And that blows me away. That's great, you know. So obviously people are watching. Like for me, I would have definitely been a drummer, because I think people can watch drum videos all day long. I think, you know, anybody can watch a drum video because it just looks so great, doesn't it? But I think people are actually watching videos trying to choose what instrument does it for them. They maybe want to, you know they want to get into music in some form, and that's the way that they're deciding, by watching lessons online. So yeah, bizarre.
That's so cool. Well, that and I think that's what's happening. I think in the double bass world too, I think that number is growing as people are finding it's like videos, and the playing standard just kind of in general has been going up so much the last few decades. I know that's been happening for electric too, and a lot of that
the playing standard is going through the roof.
Yeah, and the internet's so helpful with that. I mean, all of a sudden you can see Victor Wooten online. I mean, that was like kind of like the Jocko revolution, you know, all over.
Exactly. Again. Yeah. Like it's gonna exponentially grow that, you know. This is why you're watching kids that are sort of like 11 that are frightening. You know, they're frightening because they've got all the resources at their fingertips. They've got all the information at their fingertips. Anything they want to know, they can find it out. I can remember, for instance, this is so bizarre. I can remember thinking, what's a melodic minor scale for? And I didn't have anybody to ask. I just heard of it, and I had nobody to ask. This is when I was just starting out, right? Well, now I'd know the instant that question came into my mind, I could get an answer for that within 24 hours, a pretty cohesive one as well. Or I could just go on YouTube and find out. You know, you can find out anything instantaneously, and also you can see people doing it as well. I think the guy that, is it the 3-minute mile? The guy that first broke that 3-minute mile, what's his name? I can't remember. Anyway, but the story is that, you know, nobody had broken that 3-minute mile. But as soon as he broke it, there was a ton of guys broke it straight after him, you know, because it was proved that it could be done, you know. So all these kids are watching like these crazy, you know, they're watching Christy McBride, they're watching Reynold Garcia Fons, they're watching like Hadrian Farrow, they're watching all these like crazy ass bass players, and they're just like, yeah, well, it can be done because I'm watching it, so I can do it. Whereas before it was a little more ambiguous because, well, first of all, you had to find the record, and you know what I'm saying. I think it's just instant accessibility to bundles of information. It's crazy.
Oh, it is. It's so. I was talking to a bass player recently, and we were talking about some pieces like the Bach First Cello Suite, the Prelude, and he was saying that's becoming a middle school piece, and that's amazing because I played that for my master's recital, I think, right? but he's right, and it's because there's just so much more of this, like you're describing. All this information's out there now. I love that 3-minute mile analogy because that's totally what's happening. Very cool.
It's just pushed the barriers, and it's just opened up this chasm of learning. You know, people are learning so fast. It's crazy. The kids these days are scaring the crap out of me. Like some guys, like especially in the academy, you know, we'll get like, I think our youngest member is 11. I think he's 11, but we have like young guys as well, you know, and girls. When I say guys, I'm sort of like, you know, generalizing of just like basically dudes and dudettes. But we get these young guys, and some of them are like, I've been playing for 6 months. And I'm like, what? And they're really good, really good. And they're asking questions like I didn't even have these questions until maybe sort of like 5 years into playing. They're sort of like, oh, well, I'm superimposing this pentatonic scale over this chord. I'm like, what? And you've been playing 6 months. What is going on?
Man, and that's so cool. That's so cool. That's another thing that's amazing about what you built and just this kind of model. Like you can have an 11-year-old, and then I'm sure you've got retirees in the community, people in their 60s and 70s.
70s, yeah. 70s, yeah. We've got guys out. I think the oldest, I think, is 76, I think. Okay. I think we've got somebody that's 76 in there. And he's great as well because he's like an ex-professional as well. So he's sort of like been playing his bass his entire life. And he's like in there helping everybody out and doing the thing, and you know, and telling his stories about, you know, when he was like in military bands and stuff when he was younger, and yeah, really cool.
Man, that's great. Well, Scott, I don't want to take up your entire day here. It's so fun to connect with you like this and talk. And you're easy to find online, but just maybe let my community know, like, where's the best place to go to find out what you're
just
doing?
Like scottsbasslessons.com. You can go there and find all the stuff. Over on Facebook, again, facebook.com/Scott's Bass Lessons. You can find on Instagram, again, Scott's Bass Lessons. You'll find me, I'm pretty much everywhere. And YouTube, obviously. Yeah. Right? You can find YouTube, just Scott's Bass Lessons. Yeah. And just, if you come and say hi as well. If you've been listening, drop me a message on Instagram or Facebook and say hi, because I'd love to hear from your community as well. And props to you, Jason, as well, for just like killing it with the podcasts. Like you're doing such an amazing job as well. And just sort of like rewinding a bit to that sort of like what technology has done, and that people can listen to your podcast and hear from some of the best bass players in the world, and hear their stories is just phenomenal. So huge props for you as well, because I know, as I was saying before, there's a lot of work and organization goes into this stuff, right? We deserve a little pat on the back.
That's true. Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And thank you again, Scott. What a great guy to chat with. I'm sure you're following Scott already, but if you're not, definitely check out everywhere he mentioned. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Contrabass Conversations. Please let me know what you think of the show, any guest suggestions, any news that you've got coming up. I am continuing my experiment of spinning off news, feedback, and that kind of thing. I'm working this week on even another format. I love coming up with different ideas to deliver this kind of content to you folks. So check out our news episodes. We've got another one coming up this week. I'm also working on an all music show. So if you'd like some music featured, let me know. Again, that email for anything, interview ideas, news, or if you'd like to have some music featured, I've got piles of CDs. As I look to my left, as I look to my right here at my desk, I have so much music that people have sent me. There's not really a great outlet at present that I can find to share that music. So I'm creating one, an offshoot of the podcast, an all music show. Hope to get it out before the end of 2016. And if you have some music to contribute, I would love to check it out. I'm experimenting with maybe doing potpourri of music at first, different styles, and then maybe doing like an all jazz show, an all contemporary classical show, and all, classics, Bottesini, Von Hall, and that kind of thing. So I don't know, not sure yet what the form of this will be, and I'd love your input, thoughts, contributions, that sort of thing. And if you'd like to contribute or support this podcast in some way, there are a lot of ways to do it, financially and non-financially, and those are all listed at contrabassconversations.com/support. But you know what probably the best form of support would be to share this with a friend. I guarantee you that somebody in your life, bass player or non-bass player, that has not listened to these episodes and would get something out of this conversation with Scott, last episode's conversation with Dave Swift, or any of our other hundreds of episodes. So share this. Email the episode link to a friend, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram, share it on Pinterest, share it on whatever social media you use. And if you're not connected with me on social media, you can find me on whatever it is you use. I'm there. Just put in contrabassconversations.com/Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, whatever, and you will find me. And thank you again for tuning in. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you to our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, and thanks to Bass Capos for providing the hosting. And we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.